Hi, I'm Jake Bapst, historian here at the Gene Lloyd Cooper Archives in the third floor of the Greer Museum here on the Rio Grande campus. And today we're going to answer the question, what is the oldest building on campus? I thought it'd be appropriate, since we're going to talk about the oldest building, I thought I'd set at the oldest desk on campus. I'm sitting at a desk that was made in 1910. It belonged to O. McIntyre. It's part of the O. McIntyre display here at the archives. And so I'm going to answer the question, what is the oldest building on campus? And there's so many things related to Rio Grande, there's not really a simple answer. The oldest building on campus that we use is actually the Mad Dog Center. It was built by a man named Louis Gross in 1878. The university just acquired it relatively recently. It's also, many of us would remember it as the home of Ruth Thomas and her sister for many years. And going back to the 19-teens, it was the home of the President Simeon Byng, who also, while in addition to being president of Rio Grande, was in the Ohio State Legislature, where he's responsible for the Byng Law that made education compulsory in the state of Ohio. The Greer Museum would be the second building. It was built in 1885 by Lewis Wood. It was a private residence until 1901, when it was sold to Frank and Miriam Allen. Frank and Miriam Allen had lived at the boarding hall. They ran the boarding hall. Their son Don was born in the boarding hall. And in 1901, they bought what became known as Allen House, the Wood House, and where for many, many years they maintained a grocery store, sort of a restaurant, and also it was a rooming house. Rio Grande had no formal dormitories until the 1960s. 1958 was Davis dorm, first dorm actually built. So students at Rio Grande had to rent houses, and that's why the boarding house was so busy. My old coach lived here, as a matter of fact. I have a sort of a direct connection to it, Gene Brushart, by the way. And Rio Grande, the college didn't acquire it until 1968. 66. So that's the history. But the building that's been in continuous use the longest by the school is Anniversary Hall, which was built in 1927. Anniversary Hall came about because of a population growth in students. In the middle of 1920s, the Rio Grande College population grew tremendously. They topped 400 students, which at the time was almost unheard of. You got to remember, at that time, there was basically one classroom building that was Atwood Hall. Community Hall had been built in place of the boarding hall, which had burned, but Community Hall was more for music and sports and a meeting place for the community, hence the name Community Hall. So in the 1926, the 50th anniversary of the school, which featured a giant pageant, it lasted 2 days. There were over 500 people in the cast, and more than 1,000 people came to Rio Grande to see that pageant of the ages. So there was a lot of demand. Rio Grande was 50 years old. People were caught up in that excitement. The enrollment had really increased, and there was a need for new buildings. President Huff, Horace Huff at the time, in 1926 proposed to the board that they build a new building. The board approved that idea and started a fundraising drive. All the money to build Anniversary Hall was raised locally by donations. In 1927, in February, the contract was let out to build Anniversary Hall, let out in late January, early February. The construction contract went to the R.A. Miller Lumber Company in Middleport, and the brick contract went to MacArthur Brick. So it's made with local products by local labor. And what's amazing, construction started in the spring of 1927. In the fall of 1927, Anniversary Hall was open for classes. Anniversary Hall featured 2 large rooms. One was a library on the first floor. That's where the library was until the construction of the Davis Library in 1966. The president's office was in there. Many classrooms were in there. In addition to the basement was a cafeteria. Many of you more recent students might remember the TRC being in the basement. I know I had a physics class in the basement in which I got a D, thank goodness. I really was thankful for that D. It was physics. And so Anniversary became the go-to building on campus. At the time, there were 3 buildings. That gave Rio Grande 3 buildings: Community Hall, Atwood Hall, and Anniversary Hall. It would stay like that until the 1930s with the construction of Haining Hall. And of course, those buildings are gone now. Atwood burned. Community was torn down and built, replaced by the Fine Arts Building. Anniversary still there. Haining Hall was torn down. Anniversary still there. And the Anniversary Hall was remodeled in 1989. That was the last time and the only time there's been a lot of remodeling done to Anniversary Hall. It's been a dependable building. And what's most remarkable, I sat one day and tried to figure out how many teachers had taken classes in Anniversary Hall. And I lost count. Let's just say the Anniversary Hall is responsible for the education of Southeastern High in the last 50 years. That's quite an accomplishment. It speaks a lot to Rio Grande, which has been a center of turning out teachers since 1876. As we approach our 150th anniversary in 2026, all I can say is, go Rio.